Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, welcome to Surviving Disasters. In the DNC it says, be prepared in all things against the day when tribulation and desolation are sent forth upon the wicked. Unfortunately, a lot of good people get caught up in the desolation stuff too, don't they? President Hinckley said that life is fragile, peace is fragile, civilization itself is fragile. The economy is particularly vulnerable. We have been counseled again and again concerning self-reliance. We cannot provide against every contingency, but we can provide against many contingencies. So tonight's class, we're going to talk about some of the contingencies that we here in the Antelope Valley may have to deal with and how we can deal with them. This doesn't work. We are going to learn how to get smart before disaster strikes. Okay, tonight you should have gotten one of these. These are new, I think, hot off the press from the County of Los Angeles, specifically for the unincorporated areas in which we live. And in the beginning of the book, it talks about that basically they have all these things, all these people that can come and help us, but they probably won't be coming, so learn how to take care of yourselves. So that's what we're going to learn about tonight. So there are a few things that they talk about that we are going to talk about tonight. Having a plan, gathering supplies, getting some training, practicing what you learn, and learning how to work together. And in your handouts tonight, I did something a little bit different with your outlines, and that you have a checklist on them. And I got the idea from my friend when I was with her yesterday, and I was talking about getting ready for the class, and she said, I would just love to be able to have a checklist that I could go through and see what I already have, and then I would know what I still have left to need, because if you just give me the whole thing, then it gets too overwhelming. So tonight you have two checklists, one for 72-hour kits, and one for just general preparedness for what we're going to talk about. So, it's on your outline. You probably only have the Got Milk one. There's two different handouts tonight, so make sure you have the one for surviving disasters. Okay, there you go. Has little boxes. Okay, so what are some disaster potentials we could have here in the Antelope Valley? Number one, flooding is a big thing. I just read a report that came out this past year called the 100-Year Flood. And we're actually due for one of these. And when they had them in the past, we had over 15 inches of rain dropped in a 24-hour period, which you can imagine caused lots of flooding, especially if it comes after a fire season. So in the area that I live in Quartz Hill, even if we get half an inch of rain, we get flooding. I don't know where you live around here, but lots of the areas in the Antelope Valley, we deal with flooding. We live in a desert and we have flash floods. So it is something usually you know kind of if you live in an area that might flood, and you know, we'll talk about that a little bit later. We also get obviously high winds up here that can cause all kinds of damage. We even have been having, and push that thing in a little bit more, stick it in. I don't know what the deal is. Okay, it's not working. Okay, we don't very often get this, but we couldn't get ice storms up here. We also are prone to, we're in a fire area, and fires very often can happen after earthquakes too. Any area pretty much these days is prone to terrorist attacks, which can be biological or chemical or even EMPs, which are a nuclear blast up in the atmosphere that knocks out all the electricity. I just finished reading a book called 1 Second After. Big eye-opener where that is concerned and what we might have to deal with if there was no electricity for an extended period of time. And earthquakes, which is probably our biggest number one thing to happen. And later on in the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about a report that came out in 2008 when all these experts from California got together. It's the first time experts from so many different areas had gotten together to look at what they think might happen, where they think an earthquake really might happen and what they think the effects would be. So we're going to talk about those a little bit later on. But one thing I did find out that I want to tell you now, and that is, that I didn't know, that the biggest earthquake ever recorded in California happened between Palmdale and Wrightwood, that section of the San Andreas. It was in 1857, so 150 years ago. We're prone to have quakes about big ones about 100 every 150 years. And we also live on, what's called the Ring of Fire. It's the whole Pacific Ocean where all the tectonic plates meet together, and all the plates except for our area have had over 8-point earthquakes this year. Our area is the only thing that hasn't gone. So when those happen, that causes shifts that puts pressure on our sections next to them. So good idea to be prepared. Okay. When disasters happen, this happens to be an earthquake, you're going to be dealing with things like damage, injuries, and for those kinds of things, you may need 72-hour kits because you might need to evacuate quickly. You might need first aid supplies. What you aren't going to be doing is baking bread. Okay, lots of times we talk in our classes, we just had a class on milk and using powdered milk and all the things you can make, making yogurt. Probably not going to be doing that after a big quake. So there's, your preparedness changes a little bit. You have like the immediate kinds of things and the longer term kinds of things. When an emergency, when a big widespread disaster happens, what emergency services will be available to us? In the Antelope Valley, we have, I believe, 21 fire stations. We have 2 police stations and now 2 hospitals. Okay. This is just going to hold me. Can't put that in that. Make it change. It's not working. Okay. I don't know. Just push the button. Sit. Move your chair up so you can just hit the button and change it for me. Just the down arrow. Sorry, technical difficulties. Don't really know what's happening. Okay. 2 hospitals, and don't change it yet. Our hospitals on an average basis have, Lancaster has an 8-hour wait just on a normal basis. When a disaster happens, something widespread, they will be very quickly inundated. Most hospitals only have about 20% of open beds at any given time. So with major injuries, those could fill up very quickly. Michael Levitt, who I don't think he still is, the Secretary for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, he said, any state, any community, or for that matter, any citizen that fails to prepare, assuming the federal government will take care of them, will be tragically wrong. There's just too many people, even people that are involved in CERT programs or in some of the other programs, who think that the Red Cross is just going to come in and come to the rescue when things happen. We have to be able and willing and know that we're going to need to take care of ourselves for a while after. Okay, sometimes something that happens big in a neighboring city can also affect you. It can affect us because those people could evacuate to our area because their area is dangerous and they've got to come up here, which quickly overloads our systems. And number 2, it could mean that, I don't know what the number 2 is. Anyway, there's a number 2 and I don't remember what it is. But the wounded and stuff, okay, I can tell you for the Joplin tornado that hit in Missouri this past year, their hospitals were, one of the hospitals was wiped out, the other hospital was inundated. Obviously they had so many people die and so many injuries that the outlying towns were sending ambulances in and they were just packing people up in whatever car came by to drive them places because they had no way of taking care of them. And that could happen too. And there's so much wounded in other areas that they overflow into our area. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is to get a family plan. When you're thinking about your family plan, you have to keep in mind the kind of disasters or situations that we might be dealing with, because how do you plan if you don't know what you're planning for? So if you're planning for an earthquake, if you're planning for flooding, if you're planning for whatever. Most things, though, you're going to pretty much follow the same ideas. So you're going to do a family plan. As part of your family plan, you're going to decide a place outside your house, like maybe the mailbox or the neighbor's tree, something that's right outside your house where your family is going to meet in case something happens. This is especially important, like if there's a fire, your house catches on fire in the middle of the night, and people are escaping out windows in their bedrooms. Some of them, if you don't have this already planned, might go to the backyard, because that's closest to where their windows are. Some of them might go to the front yard, and you don't know if your families are out of the house and safe. So you all know one place to meet. You'll all go there, and you'll know that everybody's safe, and nobody will try to go back in to save anybody that maybe is just sitting out in the backyard waiting for you. So someplace in front of your house. You also want to have some place in your neighborhood. Maybe your neighborhood is, something's happened to your neighborhood and you can't get into it. Having a friend or a neighbor or a church or something that's a safe place that you can meet up at if your neighborhood is not safe. You also want to have something outside of your city. You might, in the Antelope Valley for instance, let's just say we had a big quake and this coincidentally, the aqueduct runs right along the San Andreas Fault. Now, what are the chances of that not being damaged during an earthquake? And if there is an earthquake and it's damaged, where all that water is going to go down in here, there's a very good chance when that happens that a lot of us will have to be evacuated out of the immediate area. Where would you go if that happened? And what happens if only 2 of you are home out of 8 people in your family and everybody else is somewhere else and there's no way to call each other? Well, you all know where to go so that you know that you're all safe. So having somewhere outside of your area. Then you also want to have somewhere outside of the state. Sometimes really big things happen and you need to just evacuate totally to somewhere else. Where is that person? And in addition to that, if there's just something like maybe not totally traumatic, but like an earthquake, lots of times phone lines get busy in local areas, but you can call outside. Have somebody in your family outside of your state that everybody calls to, so the check-in point. So you want to have that ahead of time too, and have that number programmed into everybody's phone. And then, in addition to that, if you are planning to go to your sister's house, your aunt's house, or your friend from high school's house that lives somewhere else, does that person know that that's where you're going to plan to go if something happens? And are they okay with you bringing your 5 kids and 3 dogs? So make sure that you're going somewhere that it's not going to cause conflict wherever you're planning on going. Okay. If you have to leave, make sure you leave a note saying, I'm fine, this is where I went. So whoever comes to look for you, whether it's family, whether it's somebody from church or your neighbor, that they know that you're okay and that you've gone somewhere else. Just simple, leave a note. Really easy. If you have kids in school, know what the school plans are. Sometimes, usually, they evacuate out just to the playgrounds. But sometimes, toward the end, in the later afternoon, if there's kids still not picked up, they move those kids over to a junior high or a high school where there's more food and more facilities, more blankets and things. So know where that place is. So if you get to the elementary school, your kids aren't there, you don't panic because you know where they are. Okay, that was that one. All right, next thing. Things to do ahead of time. Just simple home protection things that we usually all do anyway. Having smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. Having a working fire extinguisher that you've actually tested and make sure, you make sure it's up to date. Having surge protectors on all of your electronic stuff. Even electrical storms can knock out computers and TVs. You want to have surge protectors. Having insurance so that if something happens, you have a way to be able to replace whatever it is that's lost. And if you do have insurance plans, why everything is calm, take a video camera or a camera, open all your cupboards, take pictures of everything in your room, so that and keep a copy of that somewhere else besides just your house. Because when things happen, if your whole house is destroyed in a fire or an earthquake, and you were expecting the insurance company to replace things, you have to list every single thing. And it's going to be hard for you to do that unless you just open up your cupboards and taken pictures. It's the easiest thing to do. Okay, so all disasters result in 2 choices. Either staying at home or going. One more. Okay, or going. So, 2 choices. And depending on what you're doing is going to depend on what you're going to take and how you're going to do that. But you're going to prepare pretty much the same way. Okay. There is 12 areas of preparedness that we're going to talk about. We're going to go over each of these a little bit, but whether you're doing a 72-hour kit or whether you're doing a home kit, which is basically like camping supplies, it's bigger kinds of these things. It's all going to cover the same areas. All right, so the first area is medical. And I have kind of put these in the order that I think are the most important. The reason I put medical first is a lot of people are on medication that is life-sustaining. And so if you don't have extras of that in your 72-hour kits and have extras at your house, that could very, very quickly become a life-threatening situation. So that's your first level. Having an extra pair of eyeglasses. If you wear glasses, you're going to want a pair in your 72-hour kit. You're going to want to, some extra pairs so that you can see. Lots of times after earthquakes, if you wear contacts, there's a lot of debris in the air that will aggravate your eyes, irritate your eyes. So having glasses instead of contacts in those situations will be really helpful. You want to have a basic first aid kit in your 72-hour kits in your cars, and at home you even want to have a more extensive first aid kit. And then one more. In addition to that, you want to know how to use the stuff in your first aid. You want to know how to stop bleeding if somebody's got a bad cut and you can't take them into the hospital because there's too much debris on the road and hospitals are overflowing. So do you know how to deal with those things? The second thing that I put is tools. And this used to be way down my list, and I started thinking, hey, to turn off my gas, I need a tool. To turn off my water, or not my water, but most people's water, you may need a tool. So tool now becomes next on our list, because when an emergency happens, you're first checking injuries, you're just checking your family and injuries, and then you're going to check to make sure there's no gas leaks, there's no power lines down, there's no water leakage, and if there is, that you're turning things off. We were lucky enough to have a gas meter and I think it's a water meter over here, so after class you can come over and practice how to turn them on and off. We're going to talk about that in a minute. In addition to that, you wanted things like tarps and nails and duct tape and things that if you have broken windows, you have ways to seal things off. You might need to have shovels and wheelbarrows to move debris around. You might have trees down that having a gas chainsaw would be helpful for. And having extra things to be able to fix plumbing and electrical problems might also be helpful. And if you don't know how to do those things, having a book, this is the Idiot's Guide to Repair Work, having some kind of guide to help you know how to do that. Because when a lot of people are affected, it takes a long time for help to come to be able to fix your, whatever it is that's broken at your house. So if you know how to do it yourself and have the stuff to do it, it's just a lot faster. Okay. Okay, so gas shutoffs. This is something I learned a few years ago. For those of you who haven't heard me tell the story, I learned about this, that you never turn off your gas unless you smell gas or hear it hissing over at your, in your house somewhere. Because once you turn it off, you can't turn it back on. The gas company has to come do it for you. But you need to test to make sure that it can turn, especially if you have an older house. Lots of times those are stuck and they don't move. So to test it, you're going to take your wrench or your gas shutoff, and over here we have a little shutoff thing, and you can practice doing this. You want to turn it, notice how it's up and down like 12 and 6. You want to turn it just to 11 and 1. You should easily be able to turn to 11 and 1. You don't want to turn a lot past that because then you chance it going off all the way and then you're in trouble. But you want to try it, because if it doesn't move, you need to call the gas company to have them come out and replace it. Mine, they came out the very next day and replaced it. It was like frozen in place because it had been sitting there for so long. So you want to be able to turn it off when you need to do that. So check it now before things get bad. You also want to have your wrench just attached, hanging from your gas lines, not thinking, oh, I have a wrench in my toolbox that's in the garage that's now everything's on the floor and everything's on top of it. You want to just have it hanging there so when you need to do it, it's there. You want everybody in your family to know where it is and how to turn it off. So if mom and dad are at home and you happen to have kids, they know how to do that and they're able to, to do that. And you just turn it so it's at 9 and 3. Okay. You also want to know where your electrical shutoff is. Same thing, you want your kids to know this in case there's power lines down or power's arcing or you have a gas leak. You might want to turn your electricity off too. Electricity is something you can turn back on, so it's not a big deal if you turn it off. And there is a lot of discrepancy information out there. Some of it, most of it what I read, if you have one like the one over here, which is like the kind I have, you turn off all the smaller ones first and then turn off your main ones. But some of the stuff I read said you just turn off your main ones and then turn off your other ones. So I don't really know which one it is. I tried to get hold of my uncle, he's an electrician, but I couldn't. But the stuff that I saw yesterday specifically had said first this, first the lower ones, and then the main ones. If you have the kind that are these kind that screw in and out, you unscrew them. That's how you get them to turn off. Okay, water shutoffs. The only kind I've ever seen in my life are this kind, which is the kind I have now, or that kind with a handle. But sometimes they have ones that in Utah, theirs are like 6 feet down in the ground. Push one more button. And you have to have a long tool like this to be able to get down to turn your water on and off. So know where your main water shutoff is. If there is a break on your street, anywhere where water is running, you're going to still want to turn your water off because that can back up into your house. And water is one of those things that you can turn on and off too. So if you need a special tool, make sure it's somewhere close to where where your water stuff is, and everybody in the family knows how to turn that on and off too. Okay, next thing, communication. And I put this next because for most of us, knowing where our family is becomes a very big focus when something happens. We want to make sure everybody's okay. So having a way that you can communicate with everybody becomes an important thing. Your first line is just having, what if you're trapped in your bedroom? Having a whistle that you can just blow and people can know that you're in there if you're trapped in there, is a very easy, cheap thing to do. And number 2, cell phones lots of times do not work after earthquakes, or if any of the power lines are down, your regular uncorded, hands-free phones are not going to work. Your cell phones, your texting may work, but that usually gets overloaded very quickly. So, but even if your power is not on, you can use an old-fashioned corded phone. And so you can pick that up. Sometimes you just got to wait a couple of seconds until the dial tone's on, and then you're able to use it. You also want to make sure that you have a radio that uses not electricity to be able to hear what is going on. What caused the disaster? In the EMP book I just read, they thought just the electricity was out in their town. They had no idea that it was out all across the United States. So if you don't have a radio where you can listen to see if radio stations are broadcasting or where the earthquake was or whatever, you want to be able to know what's going on because then it uses your mind. And the way that the church uses and the way that almost every Red Cross and everybody else is ham radios after disasters. So it's a good thing to have. Most wards and states now have ham radio operators. That's how they will be communicating with Salt Lake to let them know what's happened and what kinds of resources are needed. Okay, shelter. Obviously, the number one shelter, if you can stay in your house and it's safe, that's where you want to be because that's where you're comfortable. If you don't have to evacuate, that's where you want to be. But sometimes you're not able to stay there because either there's been a fire or it's heavily damaged from an earthquake and you have to leave. So if you have to leave, then what? Do you have something to sleep in? This is just some ideas for like 72-hour kits. Can't pick one. Having sleeping bags, having some kind of tent. And if you do not have a tent or some place to go, if you can't stay in your house, you will end up going to an evacuation center, which are noisy, overcrowded, smelly, people snore. It's just not a comfortable situation. You would much rather be with your family. So having a tent or some place to go is your best things to do for shelter. Okay. Lighting, heating, and fuel. All right, lighting. Let's talk about that just for a second. Next month we're going to go, this is next month's topic, so we'll go into these in more detail. Lighting can be anything from a light stick to flashlights to headlamps, which I love because it leaves you hands-free to be able to see, and lanterns that light up rooms. You also want ways to cook your food. You probably don't want to eat cold food for very long. That's not very, what's the word I want to use, comforting to be eating cold food out of a can. So some way to cook your food, preferably with all of these, the rule of 3, having 3 different ways to do it. Sometimes after Katrina, there was parts where they were under they could not have fires, no open fires. And lots of times after quakes, that's the same thing because there is gas in the air, so you can't have open fires. So you have to have other ways. Solar cooking would come in really handy then. So there's some other ways of doing it. If you're in an area that can get cold, it can get really cold during the wintertime, having a way to heat, like kerosene heaters or propane heaters, or some way to keep yourself warm. Making sure you have matches, something to be able to light these things. And, you know, if you've got fireplaces or outdoor pits, you can, you know, do fires that you can cook on and help keep you warm too. So just thinking of some ways to do that. There's nothing worse than being in an earthquake and not being able to find in the middle of the night and not being able to see anything. Everything is pitch black and not being able to go anywhere. So having lighting and having it easily accessible are really important. For sanitation, obviously 72-hour kits, you just want to feel so much better to be able to brush your teeth even if you can't do anything else. So having some shampoos, some lotion, some chapstick, some toothpaste in your 72-hour kits. You also are going to want ways to wash dishes, to be able to wash clothes if it's something that's going to take longer than a few days. Ways to dispose of trash, especially after big disasters. Trash trucks are not going to be coming down your street for a while. So do you have a way to dispose of trash? And do you have a toilet kit, something with toilet paper and hand wipes and, you know, some sanitation wash to wash your hands. And one of the great things one of my things that I really like for these is trash compactor bags. They fit these kind of portable toilets really well. They're extra thick so that they don't break and leak once you're, you know, getting rid of it. So, and they're not that expensive, and you can buy them in a, you know, but I think they come in a box of 60 at Costco for like, I think they're like $12 or something. So it's really cheap. Okay, water and food. And notice this is way down the list. All those other things you're going to be having to deal with first before you are thinking about food and water. You want at least a 2-week supply of food and water. Most emergencies, even when they know that they're happening and it happens, I can tell you, well, we know with Katrina, how long did it take them to get food and water into the people? And they knew that that was coming for a week ahead of time. When the Joplin tornado hit, they did not allow anything into the town except for media for 3 days. No food or water came into the town for 3 days. And so they had to, and most of the people, well, you know, their houses were mostly gone, so there wasn't, the people that did have food and water left were sharing with the neighbors, and it just didn't go very far. And they just said you cannot have enough water. They ended up getting, some of them getting sick because they were so dehydrated. So making sure you have enough water. Bottled water, having some kind of water purifier so that many times after natural disasters, there is water comes on and off and on and off. And when that happens, it's contaminated. It's not safe to drink if the water is not flowing through your pipes, if there's been times when it's not flowing through your pipes. So you need to clean it. Having 55-gallon drums, at least one per person, is really a safe bet here in the Antelope Valley, and a way to get it out. And this is just a more high-end filter, something that's going to keep your water safe and good to taste, to drink. As far as food, in my opinion, 72-hour kits are already big. Well, you see up here, this was all in this. This weighs about 25 pounds, which is pretty heavy for me to carry for any length of time, and it barely has anything in it. Water and food. Water is the heaviest thing that you're going to put in your 72-hour kits. You only really can carry about a quart, about 3 quarts. That's about all you're probably going to be able to carry. So you want some way to purify more water if you can take that. And obviously you're not going to want to put cans of food in there because that's going to be too heavy. And you don't want dehydrated stuff because that just makes you thirsty. So I like these. They don't take up much room. They're high in energy. They taste like cookies. Who doesn't want to eat a cookie? So I think those are great. Those emergency food things, they're really boring. They're great for students, however, because they don't take up much room. They're very limited. If you really read what's in them, it's not something you're going to want to eat for very long. We have talked before about the whole idea about dinners in a bag. That's perfect for 72-hour things. It's already got the water and everything in it. You just need a pot and some fuel to, heat it up. You also have your pantry full of stuff that you can use for 72-hour, or for, your 2-week supply of stuff. So those are just some ideas. Obviously, if you're evacuating, you're not going to take this with you. But how easy would it be to grab a bunch of those and take them with you and have a complete meal already ready to go? Okay, transportation. Obviously, the easiest thing is if you can drive your car. But lots of times maybe something's fallen on your car, maybe there's so much debris in the road that you can't get anywhere in your car. So sometimes you have to use other ways of getting around after a big earthquake. They're evacuating actually. Isn't that a cool picture? They got a wagon full of stuff. He's got his little walker full of stuff. So sometimes you have to find other modes of transportation to get to where you need to go. You want to have some good shoes, something that's going to protect your feet, especially if there's a lot of debris on the ground. And one of the little tips I learned is when there are big disasters, I don't know if you know this, but the Mormon Church sends, within a couple of days, they will have 4 or more stakes that are contacted out of the area to send people in to come help. And they're all told to wear, heavy shoes and bring stuff with them. Well, they said, especially in areas where it's hot, to wear light-colored work boots, not dark, because it really helps with the heat and everything else, which I thought was a fun little tip. So light-colored boots. Having a bike, you recognize her, the little witch? Riding her bike along. So having bikes is really handy. Having off-road vehicles is also a handy way of being able to do it. And even horses come in handy when you can't get around in cars. So those are just different things. All right, safety. There's a lot of different levels of this. The first level is just in your 72-hour kits having some kind of pocket knife, something that you can, obviously is a multi-purpose thing. Knowing ways to defend yourself. Being aware of situations and how to look for things is another important way of doing it. Having mace or pepper spray or even hornet spray works really good. It squirts like 40 feet to get people across the street. Sometimes, though, one of the best things of doing is just grouping together. And you'll find this a lot after disasters where people congregate together. There's safety in numbers. You're going to want to get together with your neighbors, get together with people in your ward, get together with your families if they're close. The more people that you have around, the less chance that you're going to have problems with other people. Sometimes, and this happens, I don't even know where this was, but this happens, story I'm going to tell you had to do in Haiti. After the big quake there was thousands of people gathered around the LDS churches that were Mormon and not Mormon. That were there for safety, and they had armed guards that patrolled around at night to make sure that everybody stayed safe. So that's the whole safety in numbers thing. And sometimes things get bad. Just down in San Diego when the power went out a few weeks ago, people were starting to go crazy, and the power went out for a few hours. So imagine there's a big quake, there's weird people in the world. They go start looting, they start looking for things. And if it's something that lasts more than a few days, they might really start looking for things. So that whole safety number thing is something you're going to want to think about. Okay, important documents. Specifically, in your 72-hour kits, you want a list of your contact people, okay? Your name and phone, your information, the information of your family, information of your friends, and make sure you include addresses, phone numbers, and email. Because many times a lot of us have stuff in our cell phones now, and if your cell phones go down or damaged, you may not get that information. And just the other day I was with my friend, she couldn't remember her own cell phone number. Especially when you're stressed, you forget important numbers. So even things that you think you've got memorized, have them written down. Have a picture ID in things. And then all this other stuff is stuff you're going to want to make copies of, make lists, and keep them in a copy in your 72-hour kit and maybe a copy somewhere else. So there's a whole list of that in the handouts. So we're not going to go through all that. Okay. Entertainment. This is a big thing. I know this sounds like just frivolous, but especially if you have kids, or even if you don't have kids, if you have to go to an evacuation center, or you're going somewhere where there's a lot of sitting, people get bored very easily. And you want to keep your mind busy when things are traumatic happening. So having some things for the kids to do, for you to do, include that as part of your preparedness stuff. Something in your 72-hour kits that you can do. And obviously if you're home, you probably already have some of this stuff anyway. But something, think about it for your 72-hour kits. Okay. Now, pets. I get asked this question every single time. I even had a vet just send me a bunch of stuff that I'm going to be sending out because the National Vet Association put something together for emergencies for people with animals. So you're going to be getting a whole booklet on it. But basically, if you have pets, you need to find a way. First of all, pets are just like people. When earthquakes happen, they panic just like people do. So you need, and they tend to bolt. So fences lots of times comes down, dogs start running around, they quickly turn into packs, and things happen. So you want to have leashes or cages or somewhere, some way, somehow to keep your animals contained. And you want to make sure you've got food and water for them. And most, like large dogs, drink twice as much water as humans. So keep that in mind when you're storing your water for them. If they need medication, make sure that you've got that. And if you have to evacuate, make sure you take that with you. And some kind of toy. Can you imagine? A little dog stuck in a little cage somewhere. You want to have something to keep them busy. Something else to keep in mind, if you go, just a minute, if you go to an evacuation center, you may not take pets with you. Okay, so that means if you have pets and you're going to evacuate, you need to find somewhere for your pets to go, a family or friend or somebody, especially if you have large animal, that's going to take some thinking ahead of time of where you might go. Yeah?
You just said what I was saying. They will not let you take them to evacuation centers,
right.
So if you want to keep them with you, you've got to make sure you find them.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so preparing for disasters. This was actually from the station fire last year. Okay, next one. All right, so sheltering at home. Sheltering at home is probably the easiest thing to do because it's basically camping at your house. And hopefully this is what you're going to get to do after something happens, but many times that's not what happens. So we're preparing for both. All right, so let's talk about some different kinds of preparations. Fire preparation. This was taken from a CERT class. How many of you have had CERT training? Okay, so about a third of you. How many of you don't know what CERT training is? Okay, a few of you. Okay, so CERT training is called Community Emergency Response Team, and it is a free program that the fire department puts on, and it is pretty intensive. It depends on how, I forget how many hours is it? 21 hours or something. 24 hours, I think, or something like that. And one of the things they teach you is how to use a fire extinguisher. You actually put out a fire with a fire extinguisher, which most of us have probably never done. But it does they do all kinds of training. We have some stuff over here. My son just took in his manual from the classes over there so that you can look through. When I send you out the handout, there is a link in there for the Antelope Valley CERT thing, and you can go on and sign up, and they will send you emails whenever they're having a new class come up. Okay, so if a fire gets to this point, you're obviously not going to be saving it with your hose or your fire extinguisher. There you go. This is from the San Francisco quake in 1906. More damage is usually done after earthquakes by fire than it is by the quake itself. Fire is a very real problem after quakes. In fact, the quake that they're predicting, or the scenario that they came up with, is that immediately after the quake there'll be 1,600 fires in the greater Los Angeles area, and that those will, because there's no water pressure and there's no way to get the fires put out, those will quickly turn into they call monster fires, and they will just cover hundreds of city blocks. So fires are a big problem that you need to think about. Okay, so fire extinguishers, and I think this is keeping them up to date. All right. Does anyone know what that picture was from?
Back to the fire,
yeah.
As the emergency response to Northridge fire. If you live in a mobile home park, I highly suggest that you evacuate immediately, even if you don't smell fire, because they do the gas mains in a grid formation. There's like 12 to every main. Every main in every mobile home park went up and needed the fire department to turn them off. So they almost all burned to the ground.
Oh.
So you get out of a mobile home quick as you can if you're in a park.
Okay, yeah. Okay, anyone recognize the picture? What is it? Yes, last year. Where was it? Huh?
San Bruno, wasn't it?
No, huh?
San Bruno?
San Francisco. Remember when the whole neighborhood blew up? This is a picture of it. So sometimes even when nothing's going on, just things happen. So be prepared. Okay, flooding. We don't usually get flooding like that here, but you know, you never know. Okay, if you live in an area where there may or be flooding, you might want to keep extra sandbags around, shovels to be able to fill those up. If you live in an area where it's going to be flooding and they're telling you to evacuate, do not wait until the last minute. Getting out earlier is better. I just read this article about this guy that was evacuated after Hurricane Katrina or before Hurricane Katrina. He had just moved into the area. He'd only lived there a couple months, and one of his neighbors came over and said, "I've lived here a long time. You need to get out." I know they hadn't even issued an evacuation order yet, and he told them to get out. So him and his wife packed up and left, and he said he was so glad that he listened to the neighbor who had the advice, who'd lived through it before, because he said the people that waited got stuck in that gridlock on the freeway and couldn't get anywhere.
They want to know where to get the bags.
Oh, the fire stations will have them.
But you have to come up with your own snack.
Yeah, sometimes they'll have them if there's a lot of flooding go on. They'll get piles of them, but
Have that happen.
yeah, your own jerk. Okay, so some simple rules for flooding. Don't go watch the flooding. That's the first one. Number 2, don't drive through a flooded area. Don't drive around cones. The problem with flooding is that you don't know how much damage is underneath what you can see. A few years ago, the end of my street, on both sides, the street got washed away. And you couldn't tell that because there was water on top of it, but it was like 6 feet down. So don't go drive through them. And I love this. They're evacuating. Notice she's like taking her little 72-hour kit up to the top of the roof with her. If you have to evacuate your roof, take your 72-hour kits with you. Okay. All right. So pandemics and biological and chemical. We're just touching on this. So, with any of these, you will be, unless you have time to get out, most of the time you'll be sheltering in place. So you want to make your house a safe house. So you want to have medicines for pandemics, medicines already on hand. You want to have some kind of, garb to wear to keep you from getting sick. You want a safe room. And if there's biological or chemical things, you want to have plastic sheeting and duct tape to be able to seal up your windows and ducts and everything until everything blows through. That usually is a very short term. Okay. Big storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, just go through all the pictures. If you live in a mobile home park, you do not want to be in a mobile home when a tornado or hurricane comes through. They do not fare well with those. They tend to blow away like Wizard of Oz. If you have time, boarding up windows is a great idea. Putting anything in your yard that could become a missile flying away around, you want to put in a garage or somewhere where it's not going to be flying. You don't want to be looking out your window as the hurricane or the tornado come through. You want to get either into a bomb shelter, or if you don't have a bomb shelter, into the innermost part of your house, something with no windows, a closet, a bathroom, somewhere that's going to be closed off. And a lot of the people that survived those tornadoes that went through last year, that's where they were. You want to have a radio to be able to hear what's going on, obviously battery operated so that, with fresh batteries you can listen. And if you have, you have big trees or power lines outside your house, don't be in the part of the house where that might fall and crush you, be in a different part of the house. Okay, earthquakes. Keep going. Okay, these are all things to do ahead of time. Strap down your water heaters. Put your beds not under windows and with nothing heavy over them. Okay, notice that bed's got pictures on the sides, not right over the bed. If you have tall furniture, secure it to the walls. If you have things, cupboards or drawers that have breakable things in them that you don't want all over the floor, then put latches on them. Otherwise, it ends up looking like that. Okay, next to your bed, well, number one, you might want to consider wearing things to bed at night that you would want your neighbors to see you in. Next to your bed, you want to have a little bag hanging by your bed. In it, at the very least, some gloves, a whistle, and a mask. Remember the debris in the area, or in the air. You want to have some shoes right next to your bed, right tucked underneath your bed that you can put on before you ever get out of bed. So if there's debris, lots of times a glass on the floor in the middle of the night to cut your feet, that's not going to help anybody. Having a crowbar underneath your bed in case, you sleep with your door closed, it jams, you can get yourself out of there. And if you think, you might have a house that collapses on you, having some water in there, just, so you've got it to drink if you're stuck there for a ways is not a bad idea. Okay. So, press the button again. Oh, I already pressed it too fast. So go, shh. Don't do it. Oh, there we go. There's an earthquake! Okay. All right, so during an earthquake, number one rule, keep calm. It's so funny, I have had people say, oh yeah, well, if there's a quake, I'm gonna go here. And I'm like, have you ever been in a quake that was pretty heavy? You don't really go much of anywhere. It just sort of shakes you and you don't really move a whole lot. So, but one of the things you want to do ahead of time, and I thought this was interesting, is like you pre-plan. You go through your house and you think, if there was an earthquake and I was in this room, where would be a safe place to go? Like if I'm in my living room, there's not a lot of safe places because I have a big TV cabinet that's not secured, that's very heavy, that will probably fall. I have a brick fireplace. I have a window, and I have a sliding glass door. Lots of glass things. But I do have a little coffee table that I could, get under, and it might not be too bad. In the kitchen, I have my kitchen table. That's a pretty safe area. The living room, not a lot of places in the living room. I'll probably under the sofa table. There's a little sofa table in there I could get under. The bathroom might be okay. If I'm in my bedroom, I'm probably staying in my bed. There's not a lot in there that's going to fall on me. I can put the pillow over my head that will help protect me.
But Debbie?
I know a lot of you have heard about this whole triangle of life thing. Is that what you're going to say?
Well, when they pulled the people in the first floor collapse on our apartment complex, the people who fell out of bed and laid right on the floor next to their bed, those were the people they pulled in alive. Yeah. Because it created a pocket. It created a pocket.
If you're on the bottom floor of a cement, especially cement buildings, then that's what the triangle life thing you've probably all seen 50 emails on is about. Most of us live in wood frame houses that are 1 story or maybe 2 story, and you're not so much worried about things collapsing down on top of you. So you couldn't get, the problem like getting next to my bed is I have dressers that are going to fall on me next to my bed. So I'm not really wanting to do that. I'm going to go to the foot of my bed. I have a big plate glass window. So it's safer for me in my bed. If you're driving, you're probably not going to feel that there's a quake. It's just going to feel like you're getting a flat tire. So the only way you really can tell is if you see things moving, then you might know you can kind of slow down. Make sure, like this picture over here, you don't want to drive under bridges. You want to try not to be next to tall buildings, or especially brick buildings, because things come falling down. You don't want to be by windows. You want to get underneath. You want to hold on to things. That's the safest that they're saying. In the United States, that's the safest thing to do. Okay. All right, earthquake. See, I did this one slower. Do you know how long that quake lasted in Japan? 5 minutes. That is a heck of a long time for an earthquake. Do you know how long the Northridge quake lasted? 7 seconds. 7 seconds. Look how much damage it did. Okay, so this is what they're predicting, sort of what could happen to our area, what they think is going to happen. At least a 7.8 magnitude lasting at least 55 seconds. Initially, 2,000 deaths and 50,000 injuries. Older buildings, especially those with cement or brick or even wood that are older, will be severely damaged. Highways, the San Andreas, the Bias runs across the 5, the 10, the 14, and the 15 freeways. That will cut off all transportation to and from our area. 1,600 fires that will turn into, again, monster fires. We talked about that. Power, gas, sewer, and water lines will be broken. Roads will be impassable because of damage and debris and abandoned cars. And this was interesting to me. I read this one article that said, for people who think that people are coming in to get you, studies are showing that 95% of the people that are rescued after disasters are rescued by neighbors, people that know where they would be in a house and can dig down and find them. Only 5% of people are rescued by actual rescuers. So taking CERT training and learning how to properly and correctly and safely help people get out is a really big plus. Okay. Oh, I didn't do that right. Okay. No, it's fine. Go to the next one. Okay, so after that, 10,000 aftershocks, which cause more damage, more injuries, more fires. All right. That was a little shorter. Notice they didn't last long. Okay, so help from the general population focuses on the biggest places. If something affects us and it affects Los Angeles, the media attention, the helicopters, all that's going to be circling around LA. They're going to get all the help for at least 3 days. We'll be forgotten little stepchild up here in the Antelope Valley. So be prepared for at least 3 days to be on our own. There probably will be no power. Probably we will be dealing with contaminated water. Now, so keep going until you get to whatever stops here. Is that it? I could do that. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about these. In this book, I'm going to send you in your email, you're going to get this report. It's about 20 pages long. It's really easy reading. It's very interesting reading. One of the things that was interesting to me is they give you like a timeline. This is what happens the first minute and the first hour and whatever. It goes up to a couple of years after the quake. And it talked about no power, contaminated water for up to 6 months. 6 months to a year could be afterwards. One of the things they think is going to happen, because our area of the greater Los Angeles area, the piping and the electrical stuff is so old that so much of it will be damaged they will be actually replacing and not fixing. And so that will take quite a while for that to happen. So water will be very sporadic and power will be very sporadic for quite a while. They believe that we will be living in tents for at least 2 weeks, up to a year. Some people could be in tents because they're just not, they may not have money to fix their house, or they don't have money to go somewhere else, or whatever. So thinking about, when you think about tents, that gives like a whole new meaning to the idea of having a tent to sleep in for a few days versus a tent that you maybe stayed in for weeks or months. I like this picture because this was actually after a flood or a tornado or something. That's her home that she used to live in, and now she's living in a tent. So just gives you an idea of that it's not just going to be a 3-day experience. It's going to be something that could last a lot longer than that. And are you going to be prepared for that? Okay, so let's talk about evacuating. All right, wait, go back. All right. No, go for it. I'm changing my mind. Okay, so when you're planning for evacuating, a couple of things. Number one, always keep your gas tanks at least half full. You never know when something's going to happen. When the power went out in San Diego, people ended up staying at work and not going home because they didn't have enough gas to get home, and none of the gas stations were open because they didn't have power. So make sure you have gas in your car. If you're in an area that you think may be getting evacuated, getting out sooner rather than later is much to your advantage. What happens when this happens? People run out of gas. The cars then become, stuck on the middle of the freeway, and then pretty soon nobody can go anywhere. So you don't want to wait till the last minute. It's not good for you to do that. Just get out as soon as you can. All right. Next. All right. So why have 72 hour kits? In the last 2 years, this was in 2005, but it's pretty much the same now, 79 million Americans have been displaced for 3 days or longer by everything from tornadoes to ice storms. All right, so these are things that you might need to evacuate for. Earthquakes, fires, tornadoes, flooding, that was actually a hurricane, are panicked. Now, do they look calm, like they know what they're doing?
No.
They're panicked. You don't want to be that way. They have fire coming down their hill. They're having to load up their cars and get out. If you're organized, you can just grab your stuff and go. If you're not organized, you go in, and do you remember the picture we saw before of the car? Did you notice they have what had in there? Potted plants. Like, who cares if your potted plant burns? Come on. I read several stories after all those houses burned down in San Diego a few years ago. They sometimes only had 5 minutes warning to get out of their neighborhoods. People were grabbing the weirdest things. Aunt Mary's ugly painting that they never even liked that they took off the wall. And things that really meant a lot to them got left behind. And so when you're thinking about your 72-hour kits, yeah, that was perfect. Go back. When you're thinking about your 72-hour kit, you not only want your kit, but you want to have a list of other things you need to grab besides your 72-hour kit if you have time, and do it in priority order. You want to grab your genealogy books, your picture books, your computers, maybe some favorite heirlooms or something that means a lot to you. And that's going to be different for every person, so I didn't give you a list of what to put on that list because you're going to have to decide. But make it a list and make it in priority so that if you do have more time, other just your 72-hour kits, you can grab that and you don't have to think about what it is. You don't have to, because your brain freezes and you will grab weird things. Okay. All right, so you grab and go kits. Everybody in your family should have one. There's all different shapes and sizes of 72-hour kits. But the one thing you don't want, see that poor little girl? Mm-hmm. That backpack is too heavy for her. How far is she going to be able to walk? You want to make sure that your 72-hour kits, if you have to walk, if you cannot drive out in your 72-hour kits, that they're light enough that you're able to carry them. Now you can do some things on wheels, but consider the fact that there may be debris on the road, and then your wheels are, things with wheels may not work so well. So that, remember the picture with the old couple with the wagon and the walker? That may be, an idea to have too. Okay. So, a little bit about 72-hour kits. Really, really briefly. Okay. These are, remember all the 12 areas that we just went over? These are all things from those areas. And in your hands, you have lists of what these things are, so we're not going to go through them. But start putting together your 72-hour kit. Packs. You want extra keys, you want some money, you want, your medicines and all those kinds of things. There are some other kinds of kits you might want to think about putting together too. Oops. A kit for your office, especially if you work out of town, but even if you don't. My husband only works 4 miles from my house. The shoes he wears to work every day, he would not be able to walk home in if he had to do that. He thought flip-flops would be a great idea. I said, great, unless there's debris all over the road, then maybe not so great. So you want to have some things in there to be able to walk home. This is a great idea. It's like a little travel pillow blanket. What if you have to stay at the office for whatever reason, and like in San Diego last week, and you have something more comfortable to sleep in? Yeah. Okay. Also in your car, just go through these fast. These are all things for your cars that you should just be keeping in your cars anyway. An extra sleeping bag if you've got room to do that. Jumper cables, a shovel, a little, 100-hour emergency candle puts off enough heat that would keep the inside of your car from freezing if you got stuck somewhere where it was cold. So, anyway, those are just some ideas. One more thing. This is great, especially for teenage boys that seem to always get flat tires. That tire inflator stuff. Okay, go. Baby kits. You need to update those like every 6 months because, they grow out of their clothes very fast and their diapers. So keep that updated. Students, if you have kids away from home, they need 72-hour kits. You want them to have at least 2 weeks of food and water, something they can just open and eat. You need to have a plan for them. What if something happened and they couldn't get home? What if there was a big pandemic and the school gets shut down? Do you have a plan for them? Is there a relative they can go to? Make sure they've got gas in their car. So just figure out what you're doing with your students if something happens. Travel kit. Sometimes in the wintertime, lots of times this happens in the United States where the airport gets shut down and people get stuck at the airport and can't go anywhere. So this is something that you can take with you in a little soft-sided bag that you can even use for a pillow. And as far as the water goes, you can take an empty water bottle through security and just have it to fill up with water when fill it up with water once you get through there. Okay. So first things first. When when disasters happen, the first thing you're going to do, obviously, is check on your family and see how everybody's doing. Secondly, you're going to take care of any major injuries. Then you're going to check your utilities, see if anything's leaking, if anything needs to be turned off. If there's any fires, obviously putting them out when they're small is better than waiting till they're big. If you've got older neighbors that you know about, go and check on them and see how they're doing, especially if they don't have family that lives nearby. It's good to do that. And once you're done checking with everybody, then you're in a position that you'll be able to go help others, with cleanup and all that. Go back for a second. I'm going to talk a little bit about the neighborhood thing. One of the things that, when we talk about that 95% statistic of 95% of people are rescued by neighbors, get to know your neighbors. Really, when big disasters happen, it's the neighborhoods that get together and help each other and help protect each other. Get to know who they are, help them to get better prepared so that when things happen, you're not raiding your house, you're out there just you're just there to help each other. All right. So, after a disaster, first there's cleanup, lots of cleanup. Then there becomes a new normal. And it's amazing how just within a few days, when major things happen, that new normal takes over very quickly, and we start adapting to what that new normal is. There will be emotional trauma. Everybody will be dealing with that on one level or another. Just know that it's a normal thing to do. Find somebody to talk to and work through it. There will be lots of insurance issues. You have to be patient when big things happen. And then the rebuilding starts. I can tell you rebuilding sometimes takes a very long time. My friend that has the family that lives in Joplin, the people are now starting to rebuild their houses. They're telling them 2 years before the houses are rebuilt. That is a long time because there's so much building going on at the same time. Okay, another part of this is sharing, helping your neighbors, sharing what you have, sharing skills, sharing labor. So learning to share. Thank you. Our Heavenly Father has lovingly commanded us to prepare every needful thing so that should adversity come, we can care for ourselves and our neighbors and support bishops as they care for others. You know that if you have little girls or little kids next door to you that don't have any food, that you're going to be wanting to share with them. You're not going to want them to go hungry. So just plan for that. Plan to be able to help other people. So what do you do now? Not that. Okay, you want to make a plan. Okay, you have a lot of stuff. You've got your checklist now, okay? So you can go home, you can start thinking about, okay, if these things happen, what do we need to do? What do we want to do first? How do we do it? Where do we go? What do we do? Make a plan. Then you want to start gathering your stuff together. I think there's a picture. Gathering your 72-hour kits together. Organizing what you have, so if the lights go out, you know where to find the flashlights, you know where to find the lanterns, and then you want to do some training. First aid training is always helpful. CERT training, I can't recommend that highly enough. It is really good skills to learn. And then you want to practice. Practice in CERT, practice with your neighbors, and start working together with your neighbors. One more question. Working together with your neighbors so that you can help each other. Get to know their habits. Know who's older and who's by themselves. Who's doesn't have any family around to help them. I have 2 doors down from me. There's an old man, really old man. And every time I see him, I just can't believe he's still alive. He seems like he's like 150. But he lives by himself and his kids don't live local. I mean, he's going to need to be checked on if something happens. Find out who those people are. One of the things that I read is the reason there's neighbors are so good at helping find people is they know what the sleeping patterns are and where their friends sleep, like where their bedrooms are, so they know what to dig. They don't have to dig through the whole house. They know the area that the person would be in. Okay. Economic and social conditions appear most ominous worldwide today. With revelation and prophecy as our guide, I think it is not extreme for me to say that when all is written about our present generation, it may truly be said that we hardly had enough time to prepare to meet the impending crisis. I venture to say that all our spiritual and temporal resources will be taxed to the very limit. The Lord has declared, if you are prepared, you shall not fear. You have your checklists. Start using them. Check off the stuff that you already have. Know what you still need to work on and start working on it a little bit at a time. Good family home evening projects. Every week you can do something new to check off your list. And you'll feel better, and when things happen, you'll be able to deal with it and be able to deal with it quickly and not have to hesitate. You won't be grabbing ugly Aunt Mary's pictures. You'll have your stuff all organized. I don't even have an ugly Aunt Mary, so I that's just a bit. Okay.
Is she ugly or the pictures?
No, I didn't have an Aunt Mary. Okay. So I like this. Don't panic or go to extremes. What do you mean I can't add to the 70? I can't add it to the 72-hour kit. I never gone 3 days without playing my game console before. You have to decide what's important for you to put in your 72-hour kits, and obviously you can't take everything with you. Your kids have to understand that too. So figure out what's the most important to put in there and get it in there. You'll find there's a lot of different lists out there for 72-hour kits. Some of them have the most bizarre things in them, and I read the list and I'm like, who would put this in their 72-hour kit and why? Just bizarre things. So figure out what's important to you and get it put in there. Okay. No? No. No. Press again. Okay. So you never know when disasters are going to happen or what kind they're going to be. It could be earthquakes. It could be rioting. It could be fires. It could even be volcanoes. Who would ever think that a volcano could knock out airports in all of Europe for weeks at a time? And we have volcanoes here in the United States. Who knows when they're going to go off and what havoc they're going to produce. If you are prepared, you will survive and you will thrive. That's the whole idea. Learning what you need to do, starting to do it, and feeling so confident that you'll be able to deal with things when they come along. So I hope that you learned a lot tonight. Come up and look at the displays. Go over and try out the meters so that you'll see how they work and how they should turn. If they don't turn, go home and call your gas company and tell them to come change it out for you. Think about doing a CERT class. You'll be getting the handouts from both the classes. How many of you are not getting my emails, by the way? Now that I've had so many people tell me you're not getting them? Okay. But you're on my email list and you're just not getting them? Okay. I don't know why some people get them and some people don't. Okay. Any questions or comments? No? There's still cookies back there? Yes.
How genealogy.
How do you get your genealogy on a stick?
On a stick? I know how to do that.
Tell her to go to the Family History Center. Okay, I really want to thank you for coming. I hope that you all learned some new things. I know some of you have been here before, so some of it was the same, but some of it's different. And it's just always nice to be reminded of the things that we still need, to the areas that we're still weak in. So I hope you can go home, do that, be strong, and pass it along to your neighborhood and your friends and families. Say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Hey, Tune's going to come talk to you now.